Hey, good morning, y'all. Josh of Severe Weather. Happy Tuesday to you. Appreciate you joining me here. We've got ourselves an active day of severe weather for parts of the middle Atlantic and central and southern Appalachian region here. And I'm going to share my screen with you and talk about what is kind of a rare enhanced risk that is in effect for severe weather here later today into this evening over parts of Appalachia here, southeastern Kentucky, southwestern Virginia, Northeast Tennessee and northwestern North Carolina, all an enhanced risk for wind damage today into this evening, and also the threat for a few tornadoes and some large hail. We're actually going to have kind of two waves of storms to track as they form this afternoon over parts of Kentucky and then move east-southeastward into this evening, tracking into parts of Virginia and North Carolina kind of as we get towards this evening. But a lot of folks are in the enhanced risk. I'm actually going to name some towns because I'm not as familiar with this area. It's the area between 81, 64, 65, and 77 for those of you who may be frequent travelers. But areas that are in this include Hazard, Kentucky, Prestonburg, Pikeville, Norton, Harlan, Kingsport, and Johnson City, Tennessee, Middlesboro, just north of Morristown, but also into Virginia, places like Abingdon and Marion, and over to about just west of Wytheville, and into West Virginia, just to the south and west of Bluefield, maybe clipping far southern parts of West Virginia, towns like, pulling up my map here, except it doesn't want to zoom in, Berwind and Bishop and War, West Virginia. So it's not a highly populated area, but is an area that is not accustomed to seeing storms this intense. So this could be big for those folks. We also have the threat for heavy rain, and with the mountainous terrain here, that can lead to flash flooding. This area is certainly no stranger to floods, especially southeastern parts of Kentucky and southwestern Virginia. So if you're in the area, now is the time to be prepared for potential severe weather. Outside of that risk of enhanced weather, we do have a slight risk for severe weather just east of Nashville, from about Bowling Green, Kentucky, up to about Richmond, Kentucky, over to the east of just south of Beckley. And then as far east this evening as Roanoke, Lynchburg, Appomattox, Farmville, Martinsburg, Danville, Greensboro, Durham, North Carolina, just to the north and west of Raleigh, south to Asheboro, and just to the north side of Charlotte, and then back west into much of western North Carolina, including Asheville, Murphy, and over towards Gatlinburg and Knoxville and Athens, Tennessee. So quite a bit of population in the slight risk here, with a marginal risk surrounding it in what's going to be a pretty active afternoon and evening, I believe. Here's what we're looking at. We've got a ridge of high pressure over the southeast, and then up and above it, a pretty intense shortwave expected to move east-southeastward. Right now, you can see that centered over Illinois and Indiana. It's going to be tracking east-southeastward, and with optimal daytime heating, we'll likely see a couple of squall lines get going here with individual supercells inside of them. The areas that are going to be seeing those this afternoon will be Kentucky and Tennessee, but then they'll shift into North Carolina and Virginia, and maybe southern West Virginia as well. And on the far south side of this, we could see some intense weather as well over northeast Alabama, northern Georgia, and upstate South Carolina as we get into the evening hours. Here's where our severe weather was yesterday. It wasn't a very active day, but there were quite a few lightning strikes in parts of the northern Alabama, even to Birmingham. We did have some strong wind in that region as well. The panhandle of Florida had some severe weather. We had some hail over southeast Missouri. There were tornado warnings as well, and maybe a tornado or two that hasn't been reported yet to the national database over southeastern parts of Missouri. But that area is going to quiet down today. Everything's going to shift east as we get into the afternoon and evening hours as well. Here's a look at the GFS, the upper level pattern. You can see a pretty big block forming over the western United States and a pretty big trough forming over eastern Canada and the northeast. But in between the two, we have fast flow aloft, and that is producing the wind that is going to fire up and energize these storms later today into this evening. You can kind of see this trough swinging through here. This is kind of the hot zone where the air becomes more confluent, and that is where we likely have the severe weather shaping up. And then that trough's going to stick around in the southeast over the next few days, leading to a pattern of unsettled weather. Because we've got a block here in the west, we don't have a big trough in the northeast. This upper low is going to kind of hang tight here and produce some cooler, more unsettled weather across this area once the severe threat is over. We also have an upper low over the southwest, which is going to bring moisture up into parts of Texas. So from a severe weather standpoint, this is not looking to be super active, but it is still going to be wet and unsettled for many. And then as we get to the weekend, we see another big trough moving southeast into the eastern United States, and that is going to bring us yet another wet weekend across the eastern part of the country. It's going to pick up moisture from the southeast, bring it up the coast. I did talk about yesterday a small chance for something subtropical to get going. If it does, it's going to ride up the coast quickly Friday into Saturday and mainly head offshore. But we are going to see a trough left behind here off the southeast coast next week, and the pattern could repeat itself. But the difference is next week we see a more active track over the west. Our ridge breaks down and actually shifts eastward, so it's going to heat up over the Great Lakes, central and eastern Canada, and New England here by the middle of next week. Below that, we've got ourselves a stubborn trough which cuts off and produces cooler, wet, unsettled weather over the southeast coast. And maybe we do have something tropical to keep an eye on here in about 9-10 days. Again, it is still kind of far off in the distance to make any kind of calls, but certainly this pattern here is more favorable for an early season system to try to develop off the southeast coast. The reason why is we've got a ridge over the north and east. The end of this week, we've got a trough. Next week, we've got a ridge. When you have a ridge on top of things, then the wind shear does lessen some and allows things to maybe spin up here later next week. So that's something I'll be watching for you then, but I'm going to be more concerned today in our video talking about what's happening here in the eastern U.S. So here's our active weather across the southeast and mid-Atlantic states later today into tonight. That front's going to camp out tomorrow over Georgia, Alabama, and South Carolina. We'll have more storms firing up over the southern part of the southeast, maybe northern Florida as well in the afternoon, maybe some very heavy rain. And then low pressure tries to get forming here off the Georgia and South Carolina coast on Thursday, bringing cooler, wet weather. We'll keep an eye on this low. It looks like it's going to head up the North Carolina coast on Friday. Development's going to be slow if anything does try to develop, but it doesn't take away the fact that we're dealing with rain and some gusty winds over the North Carolina coast. So Friday, not looking like a great beach day at all. Saturday looks better for North Carolina as our low actually is going to zip up the coast and hit Long Island here Saturday morning and bring rain into New England on Saturday. And then our front moves through and could produce a few heavier storms with it, but more likely just dealing with rain followed by cooler weather for the day on Sunday. You can see off the southeast coast, though, next week could be a hot spot. We may have some low pressure development. Tough to say how that's going to play out. This run of the GFS has it well off the coast. I've seen runs before which had it a little bit farther west. So we'll be watching that area, but it's definitely going to be a cooler week in the southeast for next week, while the northeast is going to heat back up. Back across the plains, we may see some severe weather here the next couple of days in the high plains. I don't know why this is jumping, but maybe it's not jumping for you, but it's jumping for me. And then quieting down over the weekend, and then more storms erupting here over parts of Oklahoma, Texas, and Kansas around this time next week. So we do resume a more active weather track here, or more active weather pattern here over the high plains, and then shifting eastward into parts of North Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas towards the middle of next week. Here's a look at our enhanced risk area today. You can see it very well defined over northeastern Tennessee, southeastern Kentucky. There is a 5% chance of tornadoes in this region as well, and a bigger risk for severe wind, 30% across the enhanced risk area, 15% surrounding that area all the way into North Carolina, and a 15% chance that we do see some damaging hail as well, getting back close to the Nashville area, basically right back to 65 here. Tomorrow, that risk for severe weather does move out of the region, and our chance for storms does quiet down pretty significantly. Farther to the east, across Virginia and North Carolina, slight risk all the way into parts of the Triangle. The Triad is included in this. South central and southwestern parts of Virginia are certainly in the slight risk, and we do have a 15% chance of severe wind east of this enhanced risk, getting all the way over into the Raleigh area here towards this evening and down to near Charlotte. And this area could grow, so certainly we're going to be watching that for you. We do have a 2% chance for tornadoes in here as well, and up to a 15% chance of severe hail along and north of I-40. That includes Greensboro and High Point. It includes Burlington, Mebane. It includes Durham, Oxford, Granville County here. It includes Roxborough, and then gets all the way up to about Martinsburg and South Hill in Virginia. So definitely a risk for severe weather here. We're also going to see heavy rain across this region the next couple of days. The projection is for 1 to 2 inches of rain, locally heavier amounts here, right along this boundary that's moving through here today, and then even more rain off the southeast coast here over the end of the week. We'll also see more rain moving back into Oklahoma, Kansas, Colorado, and areas that really could benefit from some rain, but we do have some flood threat as well. And if you're on the Gulf Coast, expect quite a bit of rain here. Slow moving storms, amounts generally 1 to 2 inches. Certainly, there's that potential for a lot more than that to fall in any slow moving storm. Maybe some spots could see a 6 or 7 inch day here as well. Here is a look at our severe weather outlook, and you guys can see the bulk shear starts to pick up here this afternoon. It's climbing where we've got 50 knots of wind shear from the ground up to about 6 kilometers, so 6,000 meters above the ground. We do have winds increasing here out of the southwest. It is mainly directional shear, so not a lot of directional change in the wind. But there is going to be enough to support some stronger updrafts here. This is about 7 o'clock this evening. And you can see things are definitely getting more active across this region here as wind shear picks up over 60 knots. And then that carries on eastward into Virginia and northern North Carolina this evening. Does weaken some, but the area that I've highlighted here has a decent amount of wind shear with it. So we certainly have that risk for severe weather. And then things are going to quiet down here later this evening. We lose the heating of the day, we cool off somewhat, and the wind shear does start to weaken just a little bit here. Here's a look at the supercell composite index. You can see it's going to start climbing here around lunchtime in central Kentucky, and then this afternoon in particular over central and eastern Kentucky here. This is around 3 o'clock into 4 o'clock. You'll see things climb as well across western Virginia, around Wise and over to just west of Wytheville, Abingdon, and then heading into northern North Carolina as well. East of Mount Airy, maybe to about, say, Reidsville and those areas here, and just northward towards west of Martinsburg, maybe getting close to Lynchburg here in the afternoon. But the indices do support some supercells here. Any of these could produce big wind with them, big hail, maybe even a rotating storm that could produce a brief tornado. And then this evening, the indices do start to drop off. We have more of an organized line of storms that moves through, but it could certainly still produce some strong wind with it. Here's where the rotation is likely to come. This is just one run model of the HRRR, but you can see the storm tracks showing quite a bit of rotation here near Berea and south of Lexington over to about Richmond and Hazard, Kentucky, then shifting eastward into far southern parts of West Virginia. That includes Princeton, and it includes Bluefield and those areas, and then continuing into southern parts of Virginia and northern North Carolina. So this is where the area for tornadoes seems to be a little bit more enhanced over eastern Kentucky. If you're a storm chaser, this is the last place on earth you probably want to storm chase due to the elevation and the fact that the roads have to wind around mountains. But obviously, if you're a local, you need to be prepared for this, as we could have a nasty outbreak of storms here. And certainly, I think there is the risk for a stronger tornado, maybe an EF2. I think beyond that is a lot more unlikely, but certainly something we're going to keep an eye on across this area this afternoon. There'll likely be a tornado watch issued right after lunch, and then maybe another tornado watch or severe thunderstorm watch, including the northern part of North Carolina and southern West Virginia. Or I'm sorry, southern West Virginia, but also southern Virginia here late this afternoon and into the evening hours. Here's a look at the NAM for the Mid-Atlantic, just to give you guys kind of more of a longer term picture of things. And you can see how storms are going to flare up here in two waves. Here's the first wave. This is around 3 and 4 o'clock here in eastern Tennessee and Kentucky. This is going to shift east. There's another wave right behind it that could be pretty intense as well. Some bow echo showing up here on the NAM. That is where winds are going to advance quickly across this region, and could produce some widespread wind damage and power outages this afternoon. Then these two lines will start weakening this evening. This is around 10 o'clock as they move into southern Virginia, but a lot of rain expected here. It'll still be storming overnight in southeastern Virginia, but probably no risk for severe weather at that point. Then things are going to move away here by tomorrow, and we'll have a much nicer, cooler, and more settled day. Here's the HRRR model. You guys can see this morning we will see a few scattered storms along the Ohio River. Nothing that's expected to be severe weather at that point, and some heavier storms along I-64 here through lunchtime. We'll start seeing storms firing up all the way back to about Elizabethtown and Bowling Green here early this afternoon, and then tracking east towards Lexington and Fayette. As these storms continue south and east, they start picking up some packing a bigger punch around 2 in the afternoon east of Elizabethtown and southeast of Lexington, right around Berea. These will, I hope I said that right. If I didn't, I apologize. But as we get into the mid-afternoon is when things really start ramping up, and we see widespread wind damage and possibly a few tornadoes as well. If I go back here and just kind of draw a box and pick up a sounding, you guys will be able to see the winds very quickly increasing aloft here. And while it says marginal severe weather, there is enough of a hodograph for there to be a tornado in this area. It certainly has the look of potentially a supercell storm here. Notice how unstable it is as well. As things moisten up here, we are going to see dark storm clouds and fast moving storms here. So that's what I'm certainly concerned with. As we get later into the afternoon hours and evening, things will start quieting down in Kentucky, and East Tennessee is going to likely get hit. The I-81 corridor and the I-75 corridors all under the gun here between about 5 and 8 o'clock, and then things should move away here early this evening. Taking a peek farther east into North Carolina and Virginia, let me take this back for you guys. We do have a warm front that's going to bring in that surge of more humid air today. It was a nice day yesterday in eastern North Carolina. Today it gets more humid here, and with the warm front, we do have scattered showers and storms moving through southern parts of Virginia early this afternoon. As we get into the afternoon hours, we see more pop-up storms that could turn severe here over southern and western Virginia around Roanoke and Lynchburg, and then back to about Wytheville and right along the tunnel here, right along the border on I-77. Things could get pretty nasty around 6, 7 o'clock. Southwestern Virginia also going to be under the gun here. North Carolina, we see kind of these two waves. The first one pops up here in the foothills and then tracks across the Piedmont in the late afternoon towards dark tonight. The second wave moves in from Tennessee, and that one is the one that could hit the higher elevations here with severe wind, including places like Murphy and Cherokee around 8, 9 o'clock, getting into Asheville between 9 and 10, and then tracking eastward and starting to lose its punch here later on this evening. Here's a look at the rest of the Southeast. We are going to see some heavier storms firing up here, moving through upstate South Carolina, northern and central Georgia, and Alabama here this evening, as well as northern Mississippi. A lot of heavy rain expected here. Tomorrow, less likely we see severe weather. More likely, though, we see slow-moving storms that could produce some widespread flash flooding over southern and central parts of Mississippi, Alabama, northern Florida. And this area of storms will track eastward. We'll get hit maybe towards tomorrow night around Savannah, Hilton Head, Bluffton, and Beaufort here in South Carolina. And then additional rain just sits here along our boundary over central Georgia and southern South Carolina Thursday. So we have a wet day. We'll also have storms firing south of this boundary in the afternoon as well. Here's a look at the central part of the country that is seeing quieter weather today, but we will see maybe a little bit of severe weather this evening over the high plains region of western Kansas, southwestern parts of Nebraska, maybe even eastern Colorado. We could certainly use some rain here, but there could be a little severe weather. A more unsettled day expected tomorrow across this region as we see widespread storms firing up in the afternoon and tracking eastward. So while not an ideal setup for tornadoes, we certainly could see some large hail and some big wind out of any of these storms, as well as the threat for some drought quenching rainfall as well. And finally, in the Northeast, we have a cold air mass coming into play here over the next couple of days. A chilly night tonight as we drop into the 20s across much of the North Country, 30s across northern Pennsylvania. But tomorrow night, we do have the threat to see some frost all the way down into western and central Maryland, northwestern Virginia into the Shenandoah Valley, the panhandle of West Virginia, and certainly down to State College. We're looking at freezing temperatures here at daybreak on Thursday morning. So definitely protect your vegetation in the Northeast. The big cities will be fine. You know, Philly and Baltimore in the mid 40s, New York in the upper 40s, Boston in the low 40s, and even coastal Maine is going to be in the low 40s. But west of 95, it'll be cold enough for some frost in the Hudson Valley here and into western parts of Mass and much of Vermont, New Hampshire. So a late season frost expected here as our kind of our last wave of really chilly air affects portions of the Northeast. Thank you all for your time today. If you could share with your friends and invite them to subscribe, I would appreciate that. I really appreciate you stopping in today. I'll give you guys updates if severe weather becomes more imminent here with posts on my community page later today. And not only do I thank you, I want to give all the credit to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, who allows me to do this every day. Here is the reason that I am, in existence, because I've been created by God and I've been called to do this every day. And I'm a seeker and somebody who Matthew 6:33 says, "But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own." And this is saying, I don't have the strength to do everything myself. It is with God, I have been given the power to do what I do. God has all the power, and he's the reason that I do what I do. I give him all the credit for everything. And, it's really easy to worry about things. I know people are asking me about hurricane season and do I need to worry? Well, I mean, you need to be prepared, but I would not lose sleep over it at this point. Certainly, there are going to be places that get hit by hurricanes. I think that's pretty much a given. But losing sleep over it and worrying constantly about it is not going to accomplish things. You need to humble yourself, take away your worries, and put all of that burden on God, because He has given us Jesus Christ as our eternal Savior. Because in the end, when it's time to be transitioned on, or when your time on earth has expired, I know it's gruesome to say that, but everybody's going to have an end to their life. It can be the beginning of eternal life in heaven. So I wanted to share that good news with you and say, look, pal, don't worry about things. I mean, anxiety is for real. Mental health is certainly for real. I mean, I know in my family, that's something we've struggled with. However, seeking God first and putting the burden on Him takes all that stress off of your body and puts it onto Him. And He carries those burdens for you, which to me is just amazing. And that's why I believe what I do. And that's why I want to share that great news with you. So anyway, happy to pray for you if you are struggling, because trust me, we all do. But I think it's very important just to know that God listens to our prayers and that He provides for us. And you may not see it happening on your time. I know I certainly haven't, but there are blessings, and you need to go to God and thank Him. If you're not a believer and you're still listening to this, listen, I certainly wasn't either for about 30 years, but it got to a point where I just said, I don't like the path that I'm on. I believe there's more for me. I am tired of struggling every day with worrying about what everybody thinks about me. And I found God, and it has given me the power to do the same for other folks that maybe really need to hear that message. Even if it's just one person here today, I think you need to hear that message. So wanted to share that with you today, but I really hope you have a wonderful Tuesday, that you stay safe, and looking forward to having more videos this week. My schedule may change for work here, so I may have to take a day off, but I will keep you all posted, and I hope you have a wonderful day. God bless you.